Welcome to the Stewardship Podcast, where your host, financial advisor Andrew Mitchell, talks with industry experts to help you steward your time, talents, and money.
Tom, thanks for being on this episode.
Oh, you're welcome, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Why don't you start us off by just giving us a little bit of background on who is Tom and what your work experience has been like?
Okay. Hi. Well, I'm Tom Demuth, and my background is in the supply chain side of manufacturing. So I have a lot of experience doing project management. And a few years ago, I had the idea of using some of that experience to come up with a guidebook, something that would help me in my personal life. A lot of the techniques that I've learned in project management were great managing projects and getting big things done. And so I decided to come up with something that would work in my personal life.
Awesome. And that's called Voiku. And because I know you, I know what it's called. But can you talk to us a little bit about some of the philosophies behind Voiku and the thing that you put together to really help you in your personal life?
I certainly can. Yep. Voiku is a mashup of two words, cool and voyage. And that just came to me one day when I was, early on when I was starting this. It's like, oh, this is kind of like a cool voyage. So I was looking for a name, mashed that up, and that's where Voiku came from. In our early life, we are guided. Our parents guide us. We start going to school, and we have a curriculum. Our life's pretty much laid out, and it's like that until we enter the workforce. So I was looking for something that would, help me in my personal life, make some decisions about where I wanted to go and how's the best way, to get there. So that's really, another part of how Voiku came to be. And I have one here. This is what it looks like. And it's a little booklet that I can use and carry around with me, and allows me to put things in like, what's my vision, where am I going, and then what are the tasks that I'm going to do on a regular basis to reach those goals.
Yeah, so talk to us a little bit about that vision piece that you just mentioned, maybe just a little bit of a definition of, as you're working through that in your personal life, what does vision look like, or what does it mean to you?
Yeah, well, vision it's kind of like a goal on steroids. So, and let me just back up a little bit and talk about goals for a minute, because then I can build up to what vision is. So, I use that example of our early life, like when our parents are guiding us, or when we're in primary school. And we as individuals don't have a lot of choices. There's classes laid out. They're pretty broad. You're learning things like, reading and writing and arithmetic, and maybe social skills.
Yeah.
But that's our early, some of our earliest education. And then as we progress, we get into like high school. And in high school, we have a little more freedom on, we might have some electives that we can take, and a little more freedom about, our direction as far as classes go, or what we're learning.
Yeah.
But still, it's pretty guided. And somewhere in maybe our junior year, maybe a little earlier, we start thinking about what we want to do as a career. And counselors help us. That is when we start to think about what our vision is. And so take, for example, maybe somebody's pretty good at math. They like mechanical things, and someone suggests they look at becoming an engineer. That engineering piece for a high school junior is way out there, right? I mean, they don't really know what it is to be an engineer, but it's an aspirational goal.
Mm-hmm.
And once they graduate from high school, then they can go to college. And now there's another series of steps they have to go through to become an engineer.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm building up to what vision is. It's really like a goal that is on steroids, because in our early years of high school or early years of education, we're just trying to pass the classes. But as we gain more experience and knowledge, we start realizing that there's big things that we could do, much bigger things. And those are really what our visions are.
Sure. So just to kind of put an example to that, would that be, somebody's in high school, they want to be an engineer, like you said. Are they envisioning themselves being an engineer, or are they farther out than that, maybe even envisioning themselves in their 50s or 60s and what, life is going to end up as?
Right. I believe that it's our visions evolve and change all the time.
Sure.
And we don't have to have just one. You might have a vision for your professional career. You could have another vision for your family or your social life, or maybe a vision for how you want to, what do you want to do as far as a member of society?
Sure.
So you can have multiple visions that you're, constantly moving towards. And I think you make a good point. So I graduated from college. Now I'm an engineer. And here's kind of where Voiku fits in, is up until this point, somebody has told me what I need to do.
Sure.
To be an engineer, I have to pass these classes and achieve these certifications. But once I'm out of college, I'm on my own. Now what? So use, for example, maybe I want to learn how to design rockets or something. That could be another vision above and beyond being just an engineer.
Sure.
When I was in high school, all I could see was being an engineer and maybe designing cars or machines. Once I graduated from college, I have another perspective and I can see farther, and my interests have changed. So now I go after, designing rockets or something.
Yeah. So can you talk to us a little bit about how the role that a vision plays as your life evolves over time?
Right. So when I was describing the elementary school, high school, and college, it's kind of like a pyramid. So early on, I have these broad subjects, and as I progress with my life, I become more aspirational. I'm more towards the top, and I think having that vision out there in the future, it works both ways. So when I set that vision out in the future, this aspirational goal, maybe I want to build rockets. That also helps me decide what are the things I need to do that. So early in my life, people are telling me what to do to get to my vision. But once I've achieved like being an engineer, now say I want to invent a new vacuum. How am I going to do that? And having that, maybe I have the vision of, a self-powered vacuum that vacuums my house when I'm not here. I know they have them, but, at some point somebody had to have that dream and that vision.
Yeah.
So once I have it, I can start thinking about what would it take? What kind of computer would it take? And what kind of drive would it take? And how would I market it? And all those millions of questions start revealing themselves.
Yeah.
So vision can work both ways. It can be something you have and you're striving for it, but once you pick a vision, then you can start breaking it down and developing what does it take to get there.
Yeah. Is there a role that you see, or a different role that you see vision playing as people are going through crisis? I mean, we're hopefully at the tail end of this coronavirus stay-at-home order. And I'm sure that's something that's on a lot of people's minds is, okay, what role does vision play during this time?
Right. I think that's an important point. And it's a great question. And it's a great question because I think it's on so many people's minds, like what comes next? And especially in times like today when no one knows really, especially from a financial, investing, let's say investing point of view, there's a lot of different opinions about, is this a short downturn, a long downturn? There's a lot of different options,
Right.
or opinions. Having your own vision, I think, gives you an awful lot of security, and it allows you to measure yourself and make a lot of decisions for yourself. You can gather information to test your ideas and see if they work or not.
Sure.
It's much better than just kind of winging it and hoping something comes along.
Yeah. So in a certain sense, it's kind of like a compass as you're going through storms, and you could use the analogy of a boat going through a storm. It needs a compass to know where it's going to go. So in some ways, would you say that that's similar to what a vision would be?
Exactly. It's pointing you in a certain direction.
Yeah.
And if you look at a lot of like famous inventors, whether it's Thomas Edison or even people in history like Christopher Columbus, I mean, talk about a crazy idea. Everybody in the world was sailing east to get to China, and he is standing there going, "No, I think we ought to go west." Now that's counterintuitive, but again, he had a vision, and he was an experienced sailor, so he had a vision of of another way to get there.
Yeah.
And turned out, he was right.
Yeah.
Well, kind of. He never got to China, but he did discover land. So.
Yeah. And so even taking that same principle of it being a compass, even as we go through things individually, sounds like, that can be something that can guide us through periods of adversity and, whatever else that, the headwinds that we face in life.
Right. That is a big part of it. Is in my Voiku, I have several visions that I'm going after, and I can down and myself and see where it's at. Am I working on the right things? Am I allowing myself to be distracted? And sometimes I may double check the vision itself and say, well, now that I'm here, that isn't as important as I have this I want to do.
Yeah.
But the point is, all the time I'm going in a direction that I've decided.
Sure. So we've kind of scratched the surface of the need for a vision. Can you talk us through a little bit of how do we start developing? Maybe I'm, fresh out of college and I don't really know what I want to do, or I'm in a period of life where it's a transition period. What would you tell those people to say, like, here's how you can start to formulate a vision and have a direction to head in?
Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of doing brainstorming, and I think most people, not everyone, but most people have some curiosities, some things they're interested in, and I would highly recommend, taking some time and just sitting down and doing some brainstorming.
Yeah.
And thinking about, the nice thing about brainstorming is there's really no rules. In fact, the best thing to do is set down a rule that says, I'm not going to edit. I'm not going to overthink things. I'm just going to take the next hour and write down a bunch of ideas of things that interest me. And that's a good start.
Sure.
After that, you can start organizing those and see if there's any patterns. That's another great exercise. And then finally, you can sift that down and come up with some ideas on, hey, here's 2 or 3 things that I think are really important. I think time's an important ingredient in this. It's, spread it out over a few days, and let yourself, in the beginning, use your imagination and really explore what's important to you.
Yeah. Do you need to be at all concerned as you're going through the vision to think through any of the steps to get to that vision, or are you really just trying to get at where your heart is at and where you're trying to get to?
Exactly. You want to limit any kind of editing or trying to expand on any of the ideas. and just explore the ideas. Just sit down with them and kind of play with it. Make it a game if you want. And some people will cut pictures out of magazines. You might sit down with a friend and talk about it, somebody who knows you. Yes, I would strongly advise not to try and figure out the steps. That comes later. And that's an important concept about the way Voiku works, is it breaks each one of these activities down so that you can focus on it. And then because it's all in one place, at any time you can leaf through it and see the whole picture.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Would you have anything different to say for maybe, say, a business owner that's going through a crisis right now? And, it seems like a lot of businesses, they have a mission statement or a vision statement that has kind of been the guiding light for their business, but maybe they're saying like, I don't know what's going on. Like, this is crazy. Would you have anything as far as words of wisdom as far as a vision goes for a business owner?
I think vision's a very important part of operating a business. Unfortunately, a lot of times they're kind of developed by a committee and they read that way. Our vision is to supply the best product to everybody, and it's like, well, what does that mean? But you have other people, Southwest Airlines, for example. They're early on. Herb Kellerman and was sitting around and doodling on ideas, and what he and his partner came up with in Southwest was we want to make air travel affordable for everyone. And that became the vision that they constantly worked at. And it's aspirational. At that time, I mean, a plane flight was like $500 or $600 to go to Florida or Atlanta. It was very expensive, and it was pretty much a monopoly. And Southwest helped break that whole market open. You can fly to Florida for what, $40 or something sometimes.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's with 30 or 40 years going by. So it's amazing what what the industry has done, but it started with two men and a vision.
Yeah, it's incredible to see what can be accomplished when you put that kind of perspective on a Southwest Airlines, that they had this vision, they knew where they were going. And I can definitely see the value of that as an individual, and for companies to get back to the basics is really what it sounds like.
Right. It keeps them focused on what works and what they're trying to accomplish. And I think that's important for businesses today, especially in these difficult times. Do you throw up your hands and close the doors, or how do you approach the market? And if you have that, a vision like that, like the one Southwest has, it opens up a lot more opportunities. So they didn't necessarily say they were going to be the best airline ever. That wasn't really their vision. Their vision was more centered on their customers, and it was aspirational enough that no matter what the environment is, they can still be working on how do we achieve that.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. That's a really good example of that as well. So you mentioned just briefly, as you were starting to talk about vision goals. Can you talk to us a little bit more about how you define goals, the difference between goals and a vision, or how those two things play together?
Right. Okay. A vision is something that's aspirational. So a vision is something you almost, it's hard to almost believe that it could happen. So Elon Musk is working on building a spaceship to go to Mars. He wants his vision, and it's been his vision for a long time, is to help us become a multi-planet species. There's an aspirational vision, right? So that's way out there. So that's vision. The goals are the steps to get there. And, for example, one of his goals is, how do I fund this? How do I fund all the, all the engineering and new technology and development that it takes to go to Mars?
Yeah.
And he's done that by, he said, okay, let's start a company that builds rockets. And, so that was one of their goals, was to be able to launch commercial vehicles. Underneath that was another goal of, just being able to, send a rocket into orbit. So that vision is the big part out front that you're striving for, and it helps you develop, what are the goals to get there? What are the steps, the different goals that I need to accomplish to get there? And you can keep breaking it down into smaller and smaller ones. So the way I've structured Voiku is a 3-step process. And your highest level is your vision, the thing that you're striving for, that aspirational goal that you have out there. Once you have that, it's easier to come up with the next level, and that some people call them milestones. I use a term I call voyage map, and it's those big hunks, those big pieces that have to be in place. So, for example, with SpaceX, his vision is, Elon Musk's vision is, he wants to help us be a multi-species planet. To come back to that, like one step under that would be, okay, how do I fund this? It's going to take a lot of money to develop the technology. And so then he decided to start a rocket company of his own and launch commercial vehicles that would supply income that he could use to work on this aspirational goal that he has. So, launching a vehicle into orbit would be one of those big milestones. Being able to land the booster back on the Earth would be another one of those big milestones. Then if you went underneath under all of those milestones, you're going to have a whole series of other goals that you want to accomplish. So if I'm going to land a booster back on the Earth, I'll need software. I'll need an engineering design that can withstand re-entry. I'll need an engine that can refire while it's plummeting through the atmosphere. So those become other goals that you have to have in place. So it's kind of a cascading series of steps that you go through. But those are the 3 basic ones that I outline in Voiku, and it helps you put those in place.
Sure. Do you, when you're setting goals, is it always looking to vision and then working your way down, or do you ever work it the other way as well?
At this point, I always start with my vision and work backwards, and I think that's the way to do it. Early on, when someone is basically telling us what to do, then it's going the other way, where it's starting at the bottom, going up. But I think once we're on our own, we can see the world and can see opportunities. That's when we start, starting with a vision and then working our way back to, okay, if I'm going to be a multi-planet species, what do I need to do? And if I hit those, what do I need to do to hit those?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I've heard, over the years, learning about goals and things like that, that there's always, these different frameworks to set goals in, whether it's, SMART goals, where they have to be specific, measurable, all of those things. Do you use a framework at all for that once you're setting those goals, or is that more of a daily goal sort of thing? Talk us through that a little bit.
Okay, sure. Well, on the milestones, I do put dates on them because dates are important. Having something to strive for is important. And a lot of what Voiku is based on is also agile thinking, which is that we're going to do things in iterations. Let me give you an example. So I've been talking about SpaceX and using them as an example. Right now, NASA is funding several different technologies to go to the moon. Mm-hmm. And one of them is called SLS. It's being built by Boeing. And Boeing is basically they're designing this, they're going through, multiple steps, and when they're all done, they'll take this rocket to the launch pad and they'll fire it up, and it's got to work on the very first try.
Wow.
They've tested some of the components, but they've never really tested it as a whole unit or anything. So to be able to have that work, it takes so much energy and time and money to make sure every single thing is working.
Yeah.
To be able to, we're going to wheel it out on the launch pad and it's going to work.
Yeah.
Contrast that to SpaceX, and they're on prototype number 4. It just failed this week. They've been doing test firings of the engines, and something went wrong this week, and they had a failure. But they're on version 4. They've done test firings. They're checking the plumbing. They're checking their procedures. Will their design, is their design working right? They're doing all kinds of testing, and it's all very public. It's amazing. Within the next couple of months, they're going to take a slight hop with this rocket. They're going to first go about 300 feet in the air, and then they're going to go about 20 miles in the air. Those are some of their milestones. And what's interesting is by using this iterative, using these little cycles of, I'm testing something and I fail, I take it up to the level where I fail, or maybe I don't fail, but I learned something. By doing that, SpaceX, they've projected the cost to launch a rocket is going to be about $2 million, which is almost unbelievable. But let's just say that holds true. The cost to launch the Boeing SLS rocket is $2 billion.
Whoa.
It's 1,000 times more.
Wow.
So it gives you an idea of, the amount of effort that goes into making something work on the very first try versus experimenting and learning and, developing it as you go along. Big differences.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of how that might apply to your life or, just an average person's life in an individual?
Sure. So one of my milestones is to blog on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real struggle for me because I'm trying to build a website and I have a lot of irons in the fire. But when I break that down to some of my more routine tasks, what I've actually done is broken the writing process down into a process. And I've been experimenting with different ways of writing. It's almost like SpaceX, I do one and it doesn't work very well, or I read an author who talks about how his writing process, and I try and emulate it. So what I've been doing is that same thing where I'm working on publishing content more often, and valuable content. I don't want to just put things out there. And it takes some time because I have a research step and some writing steps, and I finally found a process that works more reliably. I won't say it's perfect, but I've been able to reliably produce things by using my new process. So that's an example of taking this, this milestone of writing content more often and breaking it down into some smaller steps. One, I need a better process to help me write. I envy the people that can just sit down and, just write and it comes out. I'm not one of those people. So I need some sort of process to help me guide me along. And that's what I've been working on.
Oh, that's good. How, talking about vision and goals and all of that, to some people, I think it can seem like pie in the sky. How do you go about evaluating whether a goal is good, and how do you go about making changes to those things as you go along, whether it's your vision or your goals?
One of the aspects about Voiku is it's all paper-based. And people ask me all the time why I don't make it an application.
Mhm.
And there's a couple reasons. One is there's a lot of really good research that shows that having things, writing things down, it helps reinforce, it helps creativity. And also because it's sticky note based, you can see one right here.
Yeah.
It's easy to, pull it off, move it around. If I change my mind, I can get rid of it. So I go through I spend a little bit of time every Sunday and go through what's called a retrospective. And I just review what were my goals for the week, and did I accomplish them or not? And if I didn't accomplish, and then what did I learn? Sometimes I learned things because I accomplished, sometimes I learned things because I didn't. And then I use that information to decide what I'm going to do in the following week. And that's this little cycle of going through and learning and improving and accelerating my progress.
Yeah. The other piece that I kind of think of as I think of the devil's advocate side of things to a certain extent is, there's people out there that have set goals, and whether they were too lofty goals or whether they lost sight of their goals, they don't accomplish them. And so they end up failing, kind of like you were talking about with your retrospective, and they give up on them. What would you say for those people? Would you say to get back into setting goals and going after things, or, what would your advice be for that person?
Well, I think it's really important to have goals. You certainly can go through life without focusing on goals, but everyone does them, even if they don't realize it. So, if you think about that pyramid again, I could have gotten up this morning. Well, I did. When I got up this morning, I was thinking about, okay, I had this interview with Andrew this morning, and I need to go to the bank this morning. And there's 3 or 4 things that I set up for myself that I want to do this morning. I have some other things for the business, and some people that's how they lead their life. They get up in the morning and they make up their mind on what they're going to do. Maybe their goal is just to be on time for work. Yeah, good goal. So I think whether we choose to or not, we are making goals for ourselves. The difference is if you apply yourself a little bit and set a goal, it's more likely to be rewarding for yourself, which is really, that's why we're here, to find, meaning in our life and find the rewards that we're looking for. It's not always about money.
Yeah.
So I think if someone has set a goal and decided that that's not what they want to do, that's okay. I think as long as they've given it some thought. If they just, kind of let it fall off the table and forgot about it, I'd say bring it back and think about it. Is that something you really want to give up on or not?
Yeah.
Here's another little tidbit. Leonardo da Vinci, we all know about Mona Lisa, right?
Mm-hmm.
The painting Mona Lisa, he let it sit in a closet, or he didn't work on it. I shouldn't say sit in a closet, I don't know that, but he didn't work on it for like 10 years. He took it up to a certain point and then he stopped. And then he came back to it later and finished it.
Okay.
And sometimes that happens to us in our lives too, where we maybe we hit a roadblock and we didn't know our way around it, and it took a while to kind of recover, or maybe learn a little more and then take another stab at it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do goals play a different role as we walk through crisis and adversity than our vision plays for us, or is it very similar, the role that those things play?
No, I think it's very similar, because your vision really exceeds your goal or any kind of crisis. Yeah. So again, kind of jumping back to Southwest Airlines, they're an airline, and because of the coronavirus, they are, their business has been disrupted also, but that hasn't changed their vision. And what their vision does do is allow them to come up with creative ways to work through this crisis that they're dealing with right now. And that's what I would suggest to business people too. By having a vision out there in the future that you're striving for, it helps you come up with ideas of how do we get through this? You know,
yeah, that makes sense. What, so we talked a little bit about vision earlier and walking through the process of doing some brainstorming, looking to see if there's patterns, and then putting some things together to really develop that vision for your life. And then going from there and looking at milestones and breaking those things down further to create the goals. For somebody who's just getting started, maybe they're, thinking, oh, I need to start at the brainstorming part to start looking at this vision piece. Where would you have them start as far as looking at goals?
Well, I think once they have their vision in place, once and again, I probably have rewritten my vision 5 or 6 times, and it's just little tweaks, just tweaking the words. So I personally don't think that's a bad thing. It'd be nice if I could nail it the very first time, but I think in any creative process, you want to leave yourself a little room.
Yeah.
And I think if somebody is just starting out, that's the best place to start, is thinking about what that vision is. And again, it could be about their family. It doesn't have to be that they want to be in business.
Sure.
Or it could be maybe they have a vision of what their retirement is going to look like.
Yeah.
I think especially for people just entering or early in the workforce, now's a really good time to be thinking about what you want your retirement to be like. And being someone that's closer to retirement than other people, it's so beneficial to have that plan in place early, because with investing or anything else, it's a function of time.
Yeah.
So the more time you have, the better position you'll be in.
Yeah.
But what does retirement look like? There's probably a great exercise that might be a good blog post, is to use that as an example of creating a vision. Is what does retirement look like to you?
Yeah.
Are you going to go on vacation? Are you going to sail around the world? What does it look like?
Yeah. No, that's good. That's a good point to start with. Would you say to those people that are developing their vision statement that goals need to take a back seat for a little bit, or is there a role that they can play on a day-to-day basis, or not until you really have?
No, you certainly could, and I think people do every day, set little mini goals for themselves, so they can work in tandem.
Okay.
Sometimes it does take a little while to figure out what visions you're working towards that are important to you, but you can still have benefit in starting to think about, maybe all is some of your milestones that you're going for. Like, maybe I want to take my family on vacation. That would be, to me, a milestone, and you could break that down into some smaller goals and smaller tasks about how to get there.
Yeah.
So it's all about being flexible.
Sure. Talk to us a little bit about that idea of flexibility that you had mentioned right there, just because I think sometimes we get really rigid on our goals and our vision. You talked about rewriting your vision statement several times. And, I think the reason people feel like they can't be flexible on that stuff is because, they need to accomplish this thing that they've set out to do. And, if they've changed, they've failed, so can you talk to us a little bit about that idea of flexibility and how you approach that?
Right. Okay, sure. I think, for example, if I'm working towards a milestone and it's just not working, I'm not achieving it, there's a couple of different approaches. In my past, what I would do is just buckle down and work twice as hard. I just keep doing the same thing. It's kind of like running into a wall harder. And that's one approach, but it's not necessarily the best, I think. Another approach is to, when you're stuck, or let's call it stuck, when you're stuck, is to back up for a moment and think about, how can I approach this differently?
Mm.
And early in my business career, I worked with a consultant, and he used to advocate. He used to call it, I don't care if we have to tunnel under it, go around it, go over it, we can go through it if that's the only way. But the point was, think about some other options. How else could I approach this? Or who could I ask for advice? It's always important to ask people. And that can help you break through and take it to the next level and really overcome that. If that doesn't work, then you really have to think about, is this just a dead end and I need to replan and go a different direction?
Sure.
It's a lot of judgment, but again, like Leonardo's painting of Mona Lisa, sometimes you have to leave it set for a while before you can, have the right skills to go after it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good advice for sure. Well, I've appreciated our time, Tom. I always enjoy talking to you, whether it's an interview or just catching up over coffee for sure. So if people want to reach out to you and ask you additional questions, or they want to see a little bit more about Voiku, how would they go about finding you?
The best way to do it is to go to my website. It's voicoo.com, voicoo.com. And my contact information is there. They can reach out to me via email or phone. And that would be the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Cool. Do you have any final grand words of wisdom for us before we sign off?
Well, I think just maybe to reiterate that, what I'm working on with Voiku is come up with a guidebook, and it's blank, and it's designed to use sticky notes because everybody is different. I don't want to write a book of advice, do this, do that, because it doesn't fit everybody. They're nice to read, but that doesn't really help you put a plan together. So my goal for Voiku is to have this guidebook that you can basically build yourself, so you can design the life you want to have.
Awesome.
So that's really I'll leave that as the final thought there.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it, Tom. Thanks for your time, and I look forward to speaking again in the future.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. You have a great day.
You too.
Thank you for investing in yourself. Remember to connect with us on Facebook by searching The Stewardship Podcast, or email us at thestewardshippodcast@gmail.com. Do you have an interest in connecting with Andrew? Find him on LinkedIn or Facebook, and make sure to join us for the next episode.